Isabella Rodriguez had spent 20 years fixing engines in Pine Valley, Oregon, living as quietly as anyone could in a town where secrets didn't stay buried long. But when Homeland Security surrounded her garage with enough firepower to take down a small army, they discovered that the woman who'd been rebuilding transmissions was actually one of the military's most dangerous cyber warfare specialists, and someone very powerful wanted her dead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountain town of Pine Valley sat nestled in the Cascade foothills like a forgotten postcard, where morning mist clung to evergreen-covered slopes and the pace of life moved with the rhythm of changing seasons. Population 2,847, according to the weathered sign at the town limits, though that number hadn't been updated since Isabella Rodriguez first arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and enough cash to lease the abandoned garage on Maple Street. That was 20 years ago, when she was 32 and carried herself with the rigid posture of someone recently discharged from military service. Now, at 52, Isabella, Izzy to the locals, had become as much a fixture of Pine Valley as the old bronze statue of some forgotten Civil War general in the town square. Rodriguez Auto Repair occupied a converted barn-style building with red paint that had faded to the color of dried blood, surrounded by a gravel lot where disabled vehicles waited their turn like patients in a doctor's office. Every morning at exactly 5:47 a.m., before the sun crested the mountains, residents in the nearby houses heard the same sound, a low electronic hum that seemed to emanate from somewhere beneath Rodriguez Auto Repair. It wasn't the rumble of engines or the whir of compressors. This was something else entirely, something that made the more technically minded locals wonder what kind of equipment Izzy really had down there. But Pine Valley was the sort of place where people minded their own business, especially when it came to a woman who could rebuild a transmission blindfolded and never asked for payment she couldn't afford. Izzy maintained the perfect image of small-town competence. She wore the same uniform every day, dark blue Carhartt work pants, steel-toed boots that had seen a decade of honest labor, and a gray mechanic's shirt with Rodriguez Auto Repair embroidered in faded red thread. Her black hair, now streaked with silver, was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes held the kind of steady focus that made people trust her with their vehicles and their problems. The locals had theories, of course. Agnes at the Pine Valley Diner swore Izzy had been a military engineer, pointing to the way she approached every repair with methodical precision. Tom Brennan, who ran the hardware store, insisted she worked for one of those big aerospace companies, given her uncanny ability to fabricate parts that shouldn't exist. Sheriff Linda Chen, who'd known Izzy longer than most, suspected there was more to her story but had learned not to ask questions that wouldn't get answered. What they didn't know was what existed beneath the garage's main floor, accessible only through a hidden panel behind the hydraulic lift. Descending a narrow staircase led to a space that officially didn't exist, a basement laboratory that would have made NSA technicians weep with envy. Banks of monitors displayed real-time satellite feeds, encrypted communication arrays hummed with activity, and custom-built computer systems processed data streams that most governments would kill to access. This was where Isabella Rodriguez became someone else entirely. Down here, surrounded by technology that officially had never been developed, she was static, call sign from a military unit that had never appeared on any organizational chart. The Blackout Division had been the military's most classified cyber warfare unit, specialists who fought battles in digital landscapes where victories were measured in compromised networks and defeated enemies never knew they'd been attacked. The basement contained equipment that told the story of 20 years spent maintaining capabilities she'd officially abandoned. Military-grade encryption systems, satellite uplinks that bypassed commercial networks, and a workshop where she built custom electronics from components sourced through channels that required security clearances most people didn't know existed. In the corner, barely visible under a canvas tarp, sat 3 reconnaissance drones. Sleek, silent aircraft the size of large birds, equipped with sensors that could map enemy positions from 5 miles away. Every evening after closing the garage, Izzy would descend to her hidden laboratory and spend hours maintaining systems that kept her connected to a world she'd supposedly left behind. She monitored communication frequencies used by intelligence agencies, tracked movements of personnel from her former unit, and maintained digital dead drops where old teammates could leave messages if they ever needed help. The routine had become as natural as breathing. Upstairs, she was the quiet mechanic who could fix anything with an engine. Downstairs, she remained one of the military's most dangerous electronic warfare specialists, even if no official record acknowledged her existence.
On this particular Tuesday morning in October, as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Izzy was deep under the hood of Pastor Mackenzie's ancient Ford pickup when the first signs of trouble appeared. Her basement monitoring systems, which she checked obsessively through a discreet smartphone app, detected unusual electronic signatures approaching Pine Valley. Not the normal radio chatter of state police or Forest Service vehicles. This was something else. Encrypted communications on frequencies that suggested federal involvement, moving with the coordinated precision of a tactical operation. She straightened up from the engine compartment, wiping grease from her hands with deliberate calm, while her mind shifted into combat assessment mode. 3 vehicles, heavy suspension, suggesting armored construction, maintaining perfect interval spacing as they approached from the main highway. Communication protocols that matched Homeland Security tactical teams. Electronic countermeasures suggesting they expected to encounter sophisticated opposition. Someone had found her. Isabella Rodriguez, who had spent 20 years being invisible, was about to discover that some secrets never stayed buried, no matter how deep you tried to dig the grave.
The man who walked through her garage door carried himself like someone accustomed to having his questions answered without repetition. He was tall, lean, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of pale blue eyes that missed nothing. His suit was expensive but practical, cut to accommodate the shoulder holster that created a barely visible bulge beneath his left arm. Behind him, 5 other agents spread out through the garage with the fluid efficiency of a well-rehearsed operation. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, not quite making it a question, "I'm Agent Ryan Palmer, Department of Homeland Security." He produced credentials that looked authentic, though Isabella knew how easy such things were to fabricate. "We need to discuss some irregularities in your background that have come to our attention." Isabella continued wiping her hands on the shop rag, maintaining the steady calm that had kept her alive through operations that officially never happened. "What kind of irregularities? I run a legitimate business here, pay my taxes, follow all regulations." Palmer's smile was thin and knowing. "I'm sure you do, but we're more interested in what you did before you became a mechanic." He gestured toward one of his agents, who began scanning the garage with a handheld device that emitted soft beeping sounds. "You appeared in Pine Valley 20 years ago with no employment history, no educational records, no family connections. That's unusual for someone who demonstrates such advanced technical capabilities." The device in the agent's hands was registering electromagnetic signatures, probably detecting the sophisticated electronics hidden beneath the garage floor. Isabella kept her expression neutral while calculating response options. They knew something, but the question was how much and where they'd gotten their information. "I worked freelance before settling here," she said. "Computer repair, small electronics, nothing that required extensive documentation." "Computer repair." Palmer repeated the words like they carried special significance. "That's interesting, because our analysis suggests the electronic signature from this location indicates equipment far beyond anything a typical repair shop would require." He took a step closer, studying her face for reactions. "Military-grade encryption systems, satellite communication arrays, electronic countermeasures that would be illegal for civilian possession." The agent with the scanner looked up and nodded once. Palmer's smile widened. "Here's what we know, Miss Rodriguez. For the past 6 months, unusual cyber intrusions have been detected across multiple government networks. Someone with extremely sophisticated capabilities has been accessing classified databases, monitoring federal communications, and tracking the movements of personnel from discontinued military programs." Palmer pulled out a tablet, swiping to display a series of digital forensic reports.
The digital fingerprints from these intrusions match techniques taught in a very specific program, one that officially never existed. Isabella felt the familiar weight of being cornered by opponents who had done their homework, but Palmer's approach suggested this wasn't a straightforward arrest operation. If they had solid evidence of federal crimes, she would already be in handcuffs. This felt more like recruitment. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, moving to the coffee maker in the corner and pouring herself a cup with steady hands. "Would you like some coffee? It's been a long drive from wherever you came from." Palmer accepted the cup with the gesture of someone who appreciated good manners even during interrogations. "We know about the blackout division, Miss Rodriguez. We know about static." The coffee cup didn't tremble in Isabella's hand, but something shifted behind her eyes. The name hit like a physical blow, dragging up memories of missions conducted in digital shadows, where the enemy never saw you coming and victory was measured in compromised networks and deleted files. "Blackout Division was a theoretical program," she said carefully. "Discussed in some think tanks, never implemented." "Was it?" Palmer produced another document, this one bearing classification stamps and security warnings. "Because we have evidence of its operations spanning 12 years, conducting cyber warfare missions in 17 countries, with a success rate that bordered on the supernatural." He looked directly at her. "Unit consisted of 8 specialists, each assigned a call sign based on electronic warfare capabilities. Static was responsible for communication disruption and enemy network infiltration." Isabella set down her coffee cup and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful town she'd called home for 2 decades. Pastor Mackenzie was probably wondering why his truck wasn't ready yet. Agnes would be preparing the lunch rush at the diner. Sheriff Chen would be making her afternoon rounds, checking on businesses and elderly residents. "Suppose such a program existed," she said without turning around. "Suppose someone with those capabilities chose to retire to a quiet life fixing cars and helping neighbors. What would Homeland Security want with them?" Palmer's reflection appeared in the window beside hers. "We'd want to discuss a situation that requires their unique expertise, a situation involving other members of their former unit who may be in serious danger." "What kind of danger?"
The kind where highly trained operators start disappearing from supposedly secure locations, where safe houses get compromised and extraction routes get burned. Palmer's expression grew serious. In the past 18 months, 3 former Blackout Division specialists have gone missing during routine operations. 2 more have died in what appeared to be accidents, but show signs of sophisticated assassination techniques. He paused meaningfully. Someone with inside knowledge of how Blackout Division operated. Isabella understood the implication immediately. One of their own had turned, was using insider knowledge to hunt down former teammates. The betrayal hit deeper than professional concern. These people had been family, bound together by shared secrets and mutual dependence in operations where trust meant survival. "What makes you think I can help?" she asked. Palmer reached into his jacket and produced an encrypted communication device, military-grade equipment that shouldn't exist in civilian hands. "Because 12 hours ago, we intercepted this transmission on a frequency that only Blackout Division personnel would know existed." He activated the device, and a familiar voice filled the garage, distorted by encryption but unmistakably desperate. "Static. If you're monitoring this channel, I need immediate assistance. My team is compromised, location burned, no official extraction available. They know our protocols, our safe houses, our emergency procedures. Someone's hunting us from the inside. I'm going dark after this transmission, but if you receive this, I'm at the coordinates that follow. Help me, Izzy. You're the only one I trust." The voice belonged to Marcus Ghost Williams, her former teammate and the closest thing to family she'd had in the Blackout Division. They'd served together for 8 years, covering each other's backs in digital battlefields where mistakes meant death, or worse, capture and interrogation by enemies who specialized in extracting secrets from unwilling minds. Isabella looked at Palmer, then at the communication device, feeling 20 years of careful isolation crumbling around her. Marcus was in trouble. reaching out to the one person he trusted to get him out of whatever hell he'd found himself in. And Homeland Security had the message, which meant they'd been monitoring frequencies that were supposed to be secure. "When was this transmitted?" she asked. Palmer checked his watch. 14 hours ago. The coordinates point to a location in eastern Montana, near the Canadian border. Remote area, difficult terrain, perfect for someone who wants to disappear. He put the device away. Also perfect for someone setting a trap. Isabella walked to her workbench and began putting away tools with mechanical precision, her mind racing through possibilities and calculating odds. Marcus was either in genuine trouble or this was an elaborate setup designed to draw her into the open. Either way, she couldn't ignore the call. "What does Homeland Security get out of this?" she asked. Palmer's smile returned, sharper now. "We get the opportunity to apprehend whoever's been systematically eliminating classified assets, and you get the chance to save your friend's life." He gestured toward the hidden basement. "We know you've maintained operational capabilities, Ms. Rodriguez. The question is whether you're willing to use them one more time." As Palmer and his team prepared to leave, Isabella stood in her garage surrounded by the tools and routines of 20 years of ordinary life. But beneath her feet, sophisticated equipment hummed with readiness, and Isabella Rodriguez felt the pull of old loyalties that had never really died. Static was about to wake up from 2 decades of hibernation, and Pine Valley would never be the same. After Palmer's team departed, Isabella stood alone in her garage for exactly 7 minutes, watching their black SUVs disappear down Maple Street like shadows retreating from dawn. 7 minutes to process 20 years of careful invisibility crumbling around her. 7 minutes to weigh the cost of loyalty against the safety of anonymity she'd built in Pine Valley. Then, she walked to the hydraulic lift, entered the security code that hadn't been used in 2 decades, and descended into the basement that officially didn't exist. The laboratory came alive around her as motion sensors detected her presence. Banks of monitors flickered to life, displaying real-time satellite feeds, encrypted communication channels, and data streams that painted a digital picture of the world she'd left behind. Isabella moved through the space with muscle memory, her fingers dancing across keyboards as she activated systems that had been maintained but never used for their intended purpose. First priority, verify Marcus's transmission was genuine. She pulled up the encrypted message Palmer had played, running it through voice analysis software she'd personally designed. The vocal patterns matched Marcus Williams' baseline from her archived files, stress indicators consistent with genuine distress rather than coercion. But that didn't eliminate the possibility of sophisticated manipulation or the chance that Marcus himself had been compromised. Isabella opened a secure channel and transmitted a verification code on the frequency Marcus had used. If he was alive and free, he would respond with a countercode they'd established during their years in Blackout Division. If someone else had his communication equipment, they wouldn't know the proper response sequence. While waiting for a reply, she began analyzing Palmer's claims about missing Blackout Division personnel. Her fingers moved across multiple keyboards simultaneously, accessing databases that required security clearances most intelligence agencies didn't know existed. The results painted a disturbing picture. David Wraith Chen, found dead in his apartment in Seattle 6 months ago, apparent heart attack, but toxicology showed traces of exotic compounds. Sarah Echo Martinez, killed in a car accident outside Denver, but accident reconstruction revealed signs of remote vehicle manipulation. James Pulse Thompson disappeared during what should have been a routine intelligence gathering operation in Miami. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Someone with intimate knowledge of Blackout Division protocols was systematically eliminating former team members, using methods sophisticated enough to fool federal investigators but obvious to someone who understood their operational signatures. Her secure communication array chirped once. Marcus's response came through encrypted layers that would have taken NSA supercomputers weeks to penetrate. Verification code confirmed, followed by coordinates that placed him in the Glacier National Park region of Montana. remote, isolated, and perfect for someone who needed to disappear quickly, but also perfect for an ambush. Isabella pulled up satellite imagery of the coordinates, studying terrain that could conceal threats or provide tactical advantages: dense forest, rocky outcroppings, limited access roads that could be easily monitored or blocked. If this was a trap, whoever set it had chosen the location well. She activated her custom-built reconnaissance drones, 3 sleek aircraft the size of large birds but packed with sensors that could map enemy positions from miles away. If she was going to extract Marcus, she needed intelligence on what she might be walking into. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. As the drones prepared for launch through a concealed exit that emerged near the tree line behind her garage, Isabella made the calculations that would determine whether she lived or died in the next 48 hours. She had maintained her capabilities through 2 decades of hiding, but capabilities needed to be tested under combat conditions. Her equipment was state-of-the-art, but state-of-the-art from when she'd built it 20 years ago might not be sufficient against current threats. Most importantly, she needed to consider the possibility that Palmer himself was the threat. His knowledge of Blackout Division was too comprehensive for an outside investigator, his timing too convenient. The fact that he'd intercepted Marcus's supposedly secure communication suggested either incredible surveillance capabilities or insider access to our communication protocols. Isabella opened a hidden weapons locker and began selecting equipment for a mission that officially couldn't happen. Her primary weapon was a custom-built electronic warfare suite that could disable enemy communications, jam GPS signals, and overload electronic systems from a distance. But she also packed conventional weapons, a suppressed carbine broken down into components that would fit in a mechanic's tool bag, ceramic body armor disguised as work clothing, and explosive devices that looked like automotive parts. The transformation from Isabella Rodriguez to static required more than just equipment. She changed into tactical clothing that appeared civilian but incorporated protection and utility features invisible to casual observation. Her movements became more precise, economical, reflecting 20 years of suppressed training that now demanded expression.
As she prepared to leave Pine Valley, Isabella felt the weight of old promises and new dangers. Marcus had saved her life 3 times during their years in Blackout Division, extracting her from digital battlefields where enemy hackers had tracked her location and called in military strikes. She owed him loyalty that transcended rational calculation. But loyalty was a double-edged weapon. It could save lives or doom them, depending on whether the person demanding it deserved trust. Isabella loaded her equipment into a modified pickup truck that appeared to be a simple work vehicle, but concealed communication arrays, electronic countermeasures, and armor plating that could stop rifle rounds. The garage's automated systems activated as she departed, creating the illusion that she was still working inside while actually beginning a journey that would take her 500 miles into territory where people disappeared without explanation. As Pine Valley faded in her rearview mirror, Isabella Rodriguez ceased to exist. The woman driving north through Oregon's mountain passes was Static, one of the military's most dangerous cyber warfare specialists, and she was going hunting. Her encrypted communication system crackled with Marcus's voice, distant and desperate. "Static, situation deteriorating. They found my safe house. I'm mobile, but they're tracking me somehow. Need extraction within 12 hours or this becomes a recovery mission." Isabella pressed the accelerator, feeling the truck's modified engine respond with power that didn't belong in a civilian vehicle. She keyed her radio with the calm professionalism that had defined her military career. "Ghost, this is Static. I am en route to your location. Maintain calm discipline and trust no one until you see my face." She paused, calculating travel time and tactical requirements. "I'm coming to get you, Marcus. Hold position and stay alive." As she drove through the night toward Montana, Isabella felt the familiar rush of operational planning. Target analysis, threat assessment, extraction routes, contingency planning.
The mental discipline that had kept her alive through dozens of missions was fully engaged again. But underneath the professional competence ran a darker current of uncertainty. After 20 years of peace, was she still the operator she'd once been? Could Static match the threats that had evolved during her absence from the battlefield? The road ahead disappeared into darkness, and Isabella Rodriguez drove toward a confrontation that would either reunite her with an old friend or deliver her into the hands of enemies who had spent 2 decades planning her destruction. Either way, the quiet mechanic from Pine Valley was gone forever, and Static was fully awake.
The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars that city dwellers never saw, vast and indifferent to the human dramas playing out beneath its ancient gaze. Isabella had been driving for 14 hours, pushing through Idaho and into the remote reaches of Glacier National Park, where cell towers disappeared and GPS signals became unreliable. This was frontier country, where people came to disappear and sometimes succeeded permanently. She pulled off the main highway 30 miles from Marcus's coordinates, following a logging road that hadn't seen maintenance in years. The modified pickup handled the rough terrain easily, its reinforced suspension and all-terrain tires navigating obstacles that would have stopped civilian vehicles. Isabella drove without headlights, using night vision equipment that turned the forest into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and possibilities. At a predetermined distance from the target area, she stopped and began deploying her reconnaissance assets. The 3 drones launched silently from concealed compartments, their electric motors making no more noise than large insects as they dispersed into the Montana darkness. Each carried sensors that could detect heat signatures, electronic emissions, and movement patterns from distances that kept them invisible to anyone without sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment. Isabella opened her mobile command center, transforming the truck's interior into a tactical operations hub that would have impressed Pentagon war rooms. Multiple screens displayed real-time feeds from the drones, satellite imagery updated every 30 seconds, and communication intercepts from any electronic device within a 50-mile radius. The first drone reached Marcus's coordinates and immediately detected problems. Heat signatures showed at least 12 individuals in defensive positions around a small cabin, far too many for a simple extraction. Electronic analysis revealed military-grade communication equipment, night vision devices, and what appeared to be jamming systems designed to prevent enemy electronics from functioning. This wasn't a rescue operation. It was an ambush, and Isabella had driven 500 miles directly into it. The second drone, circling at higher altitude, detected additional heat signatures moving through the forest in coordinated patterns. Another 12 individuals, probably more, establishing a perimeter that would prevent escape once the trap was sprung. Whoever had planned this operation understood tactical deployment and had resources that suggested federal backing. But the third drone found something that changed everything. Hidden in a depression 2 miles from the main ambush site was a smaller heat signature, moving in patterns that suggested someone trying to remain concealed while maintaining surveillance on the larger force. The individual's movement discipline and positioning indicated military training, possibly someone who was watching the watchers. Isabella enhanced the drone's surveillance, focusing on the lone figure. The thermal profile was consistent with Marcus Williams's physical specifications, and the positioning suggested someone conducting counter-surveillance on the ambush force. If this was Marcus, then who was in the cabin that had drawn the main attention? She activated her mobile command center and transmitted a burst transmission on the frequency Marcus had used earlier. If the lone figure was her former teammate, he would recognize the signal pattern and respond appropriately. If it was someone else, the transmission would reveal her presence but provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities. The response came 30 seconds later, transmitted from the exact location where the lone heat signature was hiding. Static. Abort mission. Primary location is compromised with at least 20 hostiles in Overwatch positions. I'm maintaining surveillance but cannot approach safely. They're using someone as bait in the cabin, possibly one of our former teammates. Marcus was alive,
free and conducting his own reconnaissance of the trap that had been set for both of them. But the revelation that someone else was being used as bait added a new layer of complexity to the situation. If another Blackout Division member was being held in the cabin, the mission had just shifted from extraction to rescue. Isabella studied the tactical display, analyzing the deployment patterns of the ambush force. Their positioning was professional, but not perfect, designed to contain and capture rather than simply eliminate. Someone wanted Blackout Division personnel alive, which suggested interrogation rather than assassination as the primary objective. She enhanced the drone surveillance, focusing on the cabin where the bait was being held. The structure was a simple hunting lodge, probably rented or purchased through intermediaries to avoid leaving digital trails. But the electronic emissions from inside suggested sophisticated monitoring equipment, possibly interrogation technology designed to extract information from unwilling subjects. The implications hit her like cold wind through mountain passes. Whoever was orchestrating the elimination of Blackout Division wasn't just cleaning house, they were harvesting intelligence. Each captured operative could provide information about classified operations, current capabilities of surviving team members, and the locations of those still hiding.
Isabella activated a secure channel and transmitted tactical analysis to Marcus. Ghost, reading 20-plus hostiles in standard containment formation. Electronic emissions suggest interrogation in progress at primary location. Recommend coordinated approach to extract asset and neutralize threat. Marcus's response carried the grim professionalism she remembered from their operational years. Negative on frontal approach. This is bigger than extraction. I've been monitoring their communications for 6 hours. This operation has federal authorization and unlimited resources. Someone with high-level access is using official channels to hunt us. The pieces of the conspiracy began forming a clearer picture in Isabella's mind. Agent Palmer's convenient appearance at her garage, his detailed knowledge of Blackout Division operations, his ability to intercept supposedly secure communications. None of it suggested legitimate Homeland Security investigation. It suggested someone with inside access using official resources for unofficial purposes. She enhanced her electronic warfare suite, scanning for communication intercepts that might reveal the identity of whoever was commanding the ambush force. The signal's intelligence painted a disturbing picture. Encrypted communications using federal frequencies, tactical call signs that suggested multi-agency cooperation, and command protocols that indicated someone with significant bureaucratic authority. But buried in the communication traffic was something that made Isabella's blood run cold. A voice she recognized from Agent Palmer's team, discussing timeline adjustments and prisoner transfer protocols. Palmer wasn't investigating the elimination of Blackout Division personnel. He was orchestrating it. Isabella keyed her radio with the calm professionalism that had defined her military career, but underneath ran a current of cold fury that she hadn't felt in 20 years. Ghost, we have a problem. The federal agent who approached me is running this operation. Palmer isn't here to help. He's here to finish what someone started 18 months ago. She paused, calculating tactical options that all involved significant risk. But that also means we have an opportunity. Marcus's voice carried understanding of the implications. You want to turn the trap around on them. Isabella smiled in the darkness, feeling the predatory satisfaction that had made Static one of the military's most dangerous cyber warfare specialists. Palmer thinks he's hunting ghosts, Marcus. Time to show him what real phantoms can do. As she began programming her electronic warfare systems for offensive operations, Isabella Rodriguez disappeared completely. What remained was Static, and Static was about to demonstrate why Blackout Division had been the military's most feared cyber warfare unit. The hunters were about to become the hunted.
Isabella's fingers moved across her keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist, but the symphony she was composing would be written in disrupted communications and compromised electronic systems. Her mobile command center hummed with activity as she prepared to demonstrate why Static had been Blackout Division's most feared cyber warfare specialist. First priority, establish secure coordination with Marcus while remaining invisible to Palmer's surveillance network. Isabella activated a communication protocol she had developed during their operational years, a frequency hopping system that mimicked natural electromagnetic phenomena. To anyone monitoring radio traffic, their communications would appear to be atmospheric interference. Ghost, switching to Protocol 7, she transmitted, initiating electronic warfare operations against hostile command structure. Marcus's response came through clearly despite the encryption. Copy static. I have visual on their command vehicle approximately 400 meters northeast of the cabin. Mobile communication array, probably coordinating with off-site headquarters. Isabella's drones had already identified the command vehicle, a sophisticated mobile operations center disguised as a recreational vehicle but bristling with communication equipment. Through her electronic surveillance, she could monitor their radio traffic, analyze their tactical coordination, and most importantly, identify vulnerabilities in their digital infrastructure. She began with reconnaissance, her systems probing the edges of Palmer's communication network like a surgeon exploring before making the first incision. Their electronic security was good: federal standard encryption, regular frequency changes, proper operational security protocols. But it was designed to protect against conventional threats, not against someone who had helped develop the countermeasures they were using. Ghost, they're using encryption protocol Delta 7 for tactical communications. I can crack it, but I need 12 minutes, and they can't know I'm inside their system until I'm ready to strike. While her systems worked to penetrate Palmer's communications, Isabella deployed her electronic warfare capabilities against the ambush force's equipment. Night vision devices began experiencing interference that would degrade their effectiveness. GPS systems started providing coordinates that were subtly incorrect, enough to cause confusion, but not immediately obvious as sabotage. Radio communications developed intermittent static that would make coordination increasingly difficult. The beauty of electronic warfare was its invisibility. Palmer's team would notice their equipment degrading, but in remote wilderness areas, electronic problems were common enough to avoid immediate suspicion. They would assume they were experiencing natural interference rather than targeted assault. Isabella's breakthrough into their communication system came 11 minutes into the operation. Suddenly, she was listening to Palmer's tactical coordination in real time, hearing his voice as he directed the positioning of his teams and coordinated with off-site support. Perimeter Team Alpha, maintain containment positions. Our target should arrive within the next 2 hours based on travel time from Oregon. Palmer's voice carried the confidence of someone who believed he controlled all variables. Remember, we need both subjects alive for interrogation. Dead assets provide no intelligence value. Isabella smiled grimly as she began recording everything Palmer's team transmitted. This wasn't just tactical intelligence, it was evidence of federal agencies conducting illegal operations against American citizens. Every word Palmer spoke was building the case that would eventually destroy him. But more immediately, she now had access to their entire tactical network. Isabella began identifying individual team members, mapping their positions, and analyzing their equipment configurations. Palmer had deployed a sophisticated force, but sophisticated equipment made them vulnerable to someone who understood electronic warfare. Ghost, I'm inside their system, she transmitted to Marcus, uploading tactical overview to your position now. Through her compromised access to Palmer's network, Isabella transmitted detailed intelligence to Marcus's position, enemy locations, equipment specifications, command protocols, and most importantly, the rotation schedule that would give them windows of opportunity for movement. She also discovered something that changed the entire tactical situation: the identity of the prisoner being held in the cabin. Voice analysis of intercepted communications revealed it was Dr. Patricia Novak, the former Blackout Division technical specialist who had disappeared 3 months ago during what appeared to be a routine consultation with Pentagon intelligence. Patricia wasn't just bait, she was the target. As the unit's technical specialist, she possessed detailed knowledge of every operation Blackout Division had ever conducted, every classified technology they had developed, and the real identities of every team member who had survived the unit's official disbandment. They have Patricia, Isabella transmitted to Marcus. She's been missing for 3 months. This whole operation is designed to capture us and complete whatever interrogation they started with her. Marcus's response carried the cold fury that Isabella remembered from their combat operations. Then we extract her and burn down everything Palmer has built. Isabella began Phase 2 of her electronic assault, moving from reconnaissance to active sabotage. She uploaded malware into Palmer's communication system, programs that would activate on her command and create chaos at the critical moment. Their radios would transmit false information, their GPS would provide incorrect coordinates, and their night vision equipment would display phantom heat signatures. But the most elegant part of her attack was psychological. Isabella began transmitting ghost signals on frequencies Palmer's team was monitoring, brief bursts of communication that suggested additional hostile forces moving through the area. She created electronic phantoms that would make Palmer's team believe they were facing a much larger opposition force. Unknown contacts moving through Sector 7 came a confused transmission from one of Palmer's perimeter teams. Thermal signatures suggest at least 6 individuals, but visual confirmation negative. Isabella smiled as she watched Palmer's tactical situation deteriorate. His teams were reporting contacts that didn't exist, equipment failures that appeared random but followed patterns she was orchestrating, and communication problems that made coordination increasingly difficult. "Ghost, enemy forces becoming disorganized," she transmitted to Marcus. "Recommend we initiate extraction in 15 minutes when their next shift rotation creates maximum confusion." As Isabella prepared for the transition from electronic warfare to physical extraction, she felt the familiar rush of combat operations where technology and tactics merged into something approaching art. Palmer had brought federal resources and superior numbers to this fight, but he had never faced an opponent who could turn his own systems against him. The cabin where Patricia was being held would be heavily guarded, but guards were useless when their communication systems fed them false information and their equipment showed them threats that didn't exist. Isabella began the final phase of her electronic assault, preparing to demonstrate why static had been considered one of the military's most dangerous assets. Palmer had set a trap for ghosts, but he was about to discover that some ghosts could fight back. "Ghost, commencing Phase 3, she transmitted to Marcus. "Time to bring Patricia home." In the Montana wilderness, electronic warfare and physical rescue were about to merge into an operation that would either reunite the surviving members of Blackout Division or eliminate them permanently. But Isabella had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, and Static was ready to remind the world why legends became legends.
At exactly 0347 hours, Isabella triggered the electronic chaos she had spent 2 hours preparing. Palmer's tactical network exploded into confusion as her malware activated simultaneously across their entire communication system. Radio channels filled with static, GPS coordinates shifted by random intervals, and night vision equipment began displaying heat signatures that existed only in Isabella's digital imagination. "All units, report status," Palmer's voice cut through the electronic noise, tension evident even through encrypted channels. "We're experiencing significant equipment malfunctions across all systems." Isabella smiled as she monitored the confusion spreading through Palmer's force. His teams were reporting phantom contacts, equipment failures, and communication problems that made tactical coordination nearly impossible. In the space of 60 seconds, his sophisticated operation had degraded into chaos. "Ghost, initiate movement," she transmitted to Marcus on their secure channel. "Enemy coordination is compromised. Window open for 12 minutes before they adapt to the interference." From her position 2 miles away, Isabella watched through drone surveillance as Marcus began his approach to the cabin. He moved with the fluid precision she remembered from their operational years, using terrain and natural cover to remain invisible to thermal sensors that were now showing false readings anyway. Isabella's role was to maintain the electronic assault while providing overwatch and tactical intelligence. Her fingers danced across multiple keyboards, constantly adjusting her interference patterns to stay ahead of Palmer's attempts to restore communication discipline. Every time his teams tried to establish coordination, she introduced new variables that kept them off balance. "Perimeter Team Bravo, we have movement in Sector 4. Thermal shows 6 individuals, but visual negative. Request clarification on rules of engagement." The beauty of Isabella's electronic phantoms was their psychological impact. Palmer's teams were trained to trust their equipment, but when that equipment showed threats that couldn't be visually confirmed, it created hesitation and confusion that was more valuable than any physical weapon. Marcus reached the cabin's perimeter, where 2 guards maintained watch despite their equipment problems.
Isabella could see them through her drone surveillance, clearly frustrated by night vision gear that was displaying photos and radio equipment that provided only intermittent communication with their command structure. Static, I have visual on the package. 2 guards at the entrance, unknown number inside. Recommend distraction to draw external security away from primary target. Isabella had already prepared for this moment. She activated a program that would make Palmer's communication system transmit false emergency signals from multiple locations, creating the impression of coordinated assault from several directions simultaneously. Emergency! Emergency! The false transmissions began broadcasting on Palmer's tactical frequencies. Perimeter breached in sectors 2, 5, and 7. Multiple hostiles advancing on command position. Request immediate reinforcement. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Palmer's voice cut through the chaos with barely controlled urgency. All available units converge on command vehicle. Repeat, all units fall back to defensive positions around primary command structure. Isabella watched through her surveillance as guards began abandoning their positions around the cabin, responding to what they believed was a coordinated assault on their command center. Palmer's careful tactical deployment dissolved as his teams rushed to defend against threats that existed only in her electronic imagination. Ghost, external security is relocating, she transmitted to Marcus. You have a clear approach to the primary target. Marcus moved like a shadow, reaching the cabin's rear entrance as the last external guards departed. Isabella monitored his progress through thermal imaging while simultaneously maintaining her electronic assault on Palmer's increasingly desperate attempts to restore order to his operation. Inside the cabin, Patricia was being held in what appeared to be a makeshift interrogation facility. Isabella's electronic surveillance had identified sophisticated monitoring equipment, probably designed to extract information about Blackout Division operations and the current locations of surviving team members. Static, I am inside. Marcus's transmission came through our secure channel. The package is secure but injured. Evidence of prolonged interrogation. We need immediate extraction. Isabella was already preparing the next phase of their operation. Her truck was positioned for rapid movement, and she had programmed her drones to provide covering surveillance during their withdrawal from the area. But Palmer's forces were still numerically superior, and once they realized they had been deceived, they would respond with overwhelming force. Ghost, extraction route Alpha is clear, she transmitted while analyzing real-time intelligence from her surveillance network. Move to coordinates I'm uploading now. I'll provide electronic cover and meet you at the rendezvous point. As Marcus carried Patricia from the cabin, Isabella escalated her electronic warfare to the final phase. She had been maintaining plausible deniability, making Palmer's equipment failures appear random rather than targeted, but now she abandoned subtlety for maximum effect.
Every piece of electronic equipment Palmer's team possessed began failing simultaneously. Radio systems transmitted only static, GPS devices showed impossible coordinates, and night vision equipment displayed a kaleidoscope of false images that made navigation nearly impossible. All units, Palmer's voice cut through the electronic chaos, his professional composure finally cracking. We are under coordinated electronic attack. Assume hostile forces have sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities. Switch to backup communication protocols immediately. But Isabella had anticipated his backup protocols. She had spent 20 years studying federal communication procedures, and her electronic assault had been designed to cascade through every redundant system Palmer's team might employ. Isabella started her truck and began moving toward the extraction point, her mobile command center continuing to coordinate the electronic assault while she drove through mountain roads without headlights. Her night vision equipment turned the forest into a navigable landscape while Palmer's team stumbled through darkness with equipment that had become worse than useless. Ghost, I'm en route to extraction point. ETA 7 minutes. Status of package? Marcus's response carried the grim professionalism that had defined their unit. Package is mobile, but requires medical attention. 3 months of interrogation have taken their toll. Patricia's been feeding them false information, but they were getting close to breaking her resistance. The revelation added urgency to their extraction.
If Palmer's interrogation had been close to success, then Patricia possessed information that could compromise every surviving member of Blackout Division. Her rescue wasn't just about saving a teammate, it was about protecting operational security that had kept them alive for 20 years. Isabella reached the extraction point as Marcus emerged from the forest, carrying Patricia with the careful efficiency of someone trained in combat medicine. Even in the darkness, Isabella could see that their former teammate had endured systematic interrogation designed to extract maximum information while keeping her alive and responsive. "Get her in the truck," she commanded, while monitoring Palmer's increasingly frantic attempts to restore coordination to his scattered forces. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they reorganize and start tracking us." As they loaded Patricia into the modified truck, Isabella felt the satisfaction of a perfectly executed operation. Palmer had brought superior numbers and federal resources to this fight, but he had never faced opponents who could turn his own technology against him. But the extraction was only the beginning. Palmer represented a conspiracy that had systematically murdered their former teammates, and Static was about to demonstrate why some ghosts were too dangerous to hunt. The war for Blackout Division's survival had just begun, and Isabella had every intention of ending it permanently.
40 miles from the extraction site, Isabella guided her truck into an abandoned mining complex she had identified during her reconnaissance phase. The rusted buildings and defunct equipment provided perfect cover, while she established a temporary command post to treat Patricia's injuries and analyze the intelligence their rescue had produced. Patricia Novak looked like she had aged a decade in 3 months. The former Blackout Division technical specialist, who had once been able to hack Pentagon systems while under enemy fire, now showed the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone who had endured systematic interrogation. But her mind remained sharp, and as Marcus provided medical attention, she began briefing Isabella on everything she had learned during her captivity. "Palmer isn't working alone," Patricia said, her voice hoarse but determined. "He's part of a network that includes current Pentagon officials, intelligence contractors, and foreign buyers who want access to Blackout Division's operational archives." Isabella activated her mobile command center while listening to Patricia's debriefing. The electronic intelligence she had gathered during the extraction was already providing disturbing insights into the scope of the conspiracy, but Patricia's first-hand knowledge filled in details that changed everything. "They call it Operation Archive," Patricia continued, accepting coffee from Marcus with hands that still trembled slightly. "The official justification is national security, eliminating security risks posed by former Black operations personnel who possess classified knowledge. But the real purpose is commercial." Isabella felt cold fury building as the implications became clear. "They're selling our operational intelligence?" "Worse than that," Patricia replied. "They're selling active capabilities. Palmer has been documenting our techniques, our equipment specifications, our tactical procedures. Every member of Blackout Division he captures provides information that gets packaged and sold to the highest bidder." Marcus looked up from his medical kit, his expression reflecting the same controlled rage that Isabella felt. "How many buyers?" Patricia consulted notes she had managed to memorize during her interrogation sessions. At least 6 foreign intelligence services, 12 private military contractors, and 3 domestic corporations with defense contracts. The total value of the information they're selling approaches $2 billion. Isabella pulled up the communication intercepts she had recorded during the extraction, cross-referencing them with Patricia's intelligence. The pattern that emerged was more sophisticated and far-reaching than she had initially suspected. Palmer wasn't just eliminating Blackout Division personnel, he was harvesting them, extracting maximum intelligence value before disposal. "They have our complete operational history," Patricia said. "Every mission we conducted, every technology we developed, every contact we established during 12 years of Black operations. Palmer has been building this archive for 2 years, using his position in Homeland Security to access classified databases we thought were secure." Isabella enhanced her analysis, using Patricia's intelligence to decode communication patterns she had intercepted.
The results painted a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of the intelligence community. Palmer had protection from officials who were profiting from the sale of classified information, which explained how he had been able to operate with apparent federal authorization. "Who's buying our information?" Isabella asked while programming her systems to trace the financial networks Patricia had described. "The Chinese Ministry of State Security wants our electronic warfare techniques. Russian SVR is paying premium rates for our infiltration procedures, but the domestic buyers are worse. They're using our methods against American targets, conducting illegal surveillance on political opponents and business competitors." Marcus finished treating Patricia's injuries and joined Isabella at the command console. "We need to know who's protecting Palmer. Someone with serious bureaucratic power has been covering for this operation." Isabella was already working on that problem, using her electronic warfare capabilities to penetrate communication networks that connected Palmer to his handlers. The financial trail Patricia had provided gave her starting points for tracking money flows that would reveal the conspiracy's leadership. "Found something," Isabella announced as her analysis programs identified patterns in the intercepted communications. "Palmer reports to someone using the code name Architect. All operational orders and financial authorizations flow through this individual." She enhanced the voice analysis, running Palmer's recorded communications through pattern recognition software that could identify speakers even through heavy encryption. The results made her blood run cold. "I know that voice," Isabella said, pulling up archived recordings from their Blackout Division operational files. "Architect is Colonel Viktor Petrov, former Pentagon intelligence liaison who had oversight access to our missions." Patricia's face went pale as the implications hit her. "Petrov had administrative access to our entire operational database. He knows everything: our real identities, our current locations, our capabilities, and our weaknesses."
Isabella felt the pieces of the conspiracy clicking into place with sickening clarity. Petrov had been their handler during the final years of Blackout Division, the man who provided their mission parameters and operational support. He had intimate knowledge of their procedures, their personnel, and their post-disbandment arrangements. "He's been planning this since we were officially disbanded," Marcus realized. 20 years to identify our new identities, monitor our activities, and build the network necessary to eliminate us systematically. Isabella accessed her archived files on Petrov, studying the man who had betrayed them, former military intelligence with connections throughout the defense establishment, current position as a Pentagon consultant with security clearances that provided access to classified personnel databases. He had the authority to authorize operations like Palmer's and the connections to profit from the intelligence they produced. "How do we stop him?" Patricia asked. "Petrov has protection at the highest levels, unlimited resources, and 2 decades of preparation. Even if we expose Palmer, Petrov can sacrifice him and continue the operation with new personnel." Isabella smiled with the cold satisfaction that had made Static legendary among cyber warfare specialists. "We stop him by using his own network against him. Petrov built Operation Archive to harvest our capabilities, but he made one crucial mistake. She activated her most sophisticated hacking programs, systems she had developed during 20 years of preparation for exactly this scenario. He assumed we were hiding from our past instead of preparing for war." As Isabella began penetrating the financial and communication networks that connected Petrov to his buyers, she felt the familiar rush of hunting an enemy who had no idea he was being stalked. Petrov had spent 2 decades building his conspiracy, but he had never faced an opponent who could turn his own systems against him. "Ghost, Static, I need you to understand something," Isabella said as her programs began mapping Petrov's entire network. "This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about justice for our murdered teammates and ensuring that no one else suffers what Patricia endured." Marcus checked his weapon and prepared for what he knew was coming. "What do you need us to do?" Isabella's fingers moved across multiple keyboards as she prepared to demonstrate why Blackout Division had been the military's most feared cyber warfare unit.
We're going to hunt every member of Petrov's network, expose every transaction, and broadcast the evidence to every journalist and congressional oversight committee in Washington. As her electronic assault on Petrov's conspiracy began, Isabella felt the satisfaction of a predator who had finally identified her true prey. Palmer had been a tool, but Petrov was the architect of their teammates' deaths. And architects, Isabella had learned during 20 years of electronic warfare, always left blueprints that could be stolen by someone who knew where to look. The war for Blackout Division's legacy was about to escalate beyond anything Petrov had planned for, and Static was ready to remind the world why some legends were too dangerous to betray.
Isabella's transformation into full combat mode was like watching a master artist prepare for their greatest work. Her mobile command center became the nerve center for a cyber warfare operation that would have impressed Pentagon war rooms. But this wasn't about national security. This was about justice for murdered teammates and exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. Patricia, I need every financial code, communication protocol, and access point you memorized during your captivity, Isabella said while her fingers danced across multiple keyboards. Marcus, monitor our physical security and prepare for rapid displacement. Once I start this assault, Petrov will throw everything he has at our location. Isabella began with reconnaissance, her systems probing the edges of Petrov's network like a surgeon mapping arteries before beginning a complex operation. Operation Archive had been built over 2 decades, creating a web of financial accounts, communication channels, and operational assets that spanned 3 continents. But complexity created vulnerabilities, and Isabella had spent 20 years learning to exploit exactly these kinds of weaknesses. Her first target was the financial infrastructure. Patricia's intelligence had provided account numbers, routing codes, and transaction patterns that revealed how Petrov monetized stolen Blackout Division intelligence. Isabella began tracing money flows, following digital breadcrumbs that led from Pentagon slush funds to offshore accounts to payments made to foreign intelligence services. Found the primary transaction hub, she announced while her programs penetrated banking systems that were supposed to be impregnable. Petrov's been using a network of shell companies to launder payments from buyers. 18 months of transactions, total value approaching $3 billion. As her financial analysis programs worked, Isabella launched a parallel assault on Petrov's communication infrastructure. The encrypted channels Palmer had been using were just the visible surface of a much larger network that connected Petrov to buyers around the world. Each communication protocol she cracked provided access to additional systems, creating a cascade effect that opened new attack vectors. Static, we've got incoming, called from his surveillance position. 3 helicopters approaching from the southeast, federal markings but flying in military formation. Palmer has found us. Isabella smiled grimly as she activated defensive protocols she had prepared for exactly this scenario. Her truck contained electronic countermeasures that could disrupt helicopter navigation systems, communication jamming equipment that would prevent coordination between attacking aircraft, and signal spoofing technology that would make their actual location appear to be several miles away. Let them come, she said while escalating her cyber assault on Petrov's network. Palmer is about to discover what happens when you hunt someone who can fight back. Her electronic warfare suite engaged the approaching helicopters with invisible weapons that were more effective than missiles. GPS systems began providing false coordinates, radio communications filled with static and interference, and navigation computers started displaying phantom landmarks that didn't exist. Within minutes, Palmer's carefully coordinated air assault had devolved into confusion as his pilots struggled with equipment that had become unreliable. But Isabella's primary focus remained on Petrov's network. She had penetrated his financial systems and was now systematically documenting every transaction, every payment, every piece of evidence that would prove the scope of his conspiracy. But documentation wasn't enough. She wanted to destroy his capability to continue operations. Patricia, accessing the buyer database now, Isabella announced while her programs cracked the encryption protecting Petrov's client list. Foreign intelligence services, defense contractors, private military companies. I'm copying everything and preparing to broadcast it to every major news organization simultaneously. The buyer database was an intelligence goldmine that revealed the full scoop of Petrov's treason.
Chinese Ministry of State Security had paid $200 million for Blackout Division's electronic warfare techniques. Russian SVR had purchased infiltration procedures for $150 million. But the domestic buyers were most disturbing. American corporations using stolen military capabilities for illegal surveillance and corporate espionage. Isabella's communication intercept programs suddenly detected an encrypted transmission that made her blood run cold. Petrov's voice speaking directly to Palmer about contingency protocols for eliminating witnesses. Palmer, Operation Archive is compromised. Petrov's transmission crackled through Isabella's speakers. Activate termination protocols for all captured assets and eliminate the escaped personnel immediately. Authorization Sierra 70. Isabella realized with horror that Petrov had other captured Blackout Division personnel. Patricia wasn't his only prisoner. Somewhere in his network, other members of their former unit were being held for interrogation. The termination protocols meant Petrov was prepared to murder them rather than risk further exposure. Marcus, Patricia, we have a problem, Isabella announced while frantically tracing the source of Petrov's transmission. He has other prisoners and he just ordered their execution.
Patricia looked up from the intelligence files she had been organizing. David Chen's disappearance wasn't assassination. They captured him alive. Same with Sarah Martinez. If Petrov has been taking prisoners instead of just killing targets... Isabella's analysis programs located the source of Petrov's transmission, a federal facility outside Washington, D.C. that officially didn't exist but showed up in classified budget allocations as a secure research installation. The facility's electronic signature suggested sophisticated interrogation capabilities and the kind of security that was designed to prevent escape rather than simple intrusion. Found them, Isabella said, her voice carrying the cold fury that had made static legendary. Petrov's running a black site interrogation facility. I'm reading electronic signatures consistent with holding at least 4 individuals. The scope of Petrov's operation became clear with sickening completeness. He hadn't just been eliminating Blackout Division personnel, he had been systematically capturing them, extracting intelligence through prolonged torture, and then selling that information while disposing of the sources. Isabella made a decision that would either save her surviving teammates or doom them all. Instead of continuing her careful infiltration of Petrov's network, she shifted to full assault mode, using every cyber warfare capability she possessed to attack his systems simultaneously. I'm going nuclear, she announced, while her programs began systematically destroying Petrov's operational infrastructure. Financial accounts, communication networks, operational databases, I'm burning it all down. Her assault was digital warfare on a scale that would have impressed military planners. Bank accounts were emptied and their contents transferred to federal law enforcement agencies. Communication systems were compromised and their contents broadcast to news organizations. Operational databases were copied and then destroyed, eliminating Petrov's ability to continue his conspiracy while preserving evidence of his crimes. But the most elegant part of Isabella's attack was psychological. She began broadcasting Petrov's own communications to his buyers, revealing that their secure transactions had been monitored and recorded. Foreign intelligence services discovered that their classified purchases were being exposed. Corporate executives realized that their illegal surveillance operations were being documented by federal investigators. In the space of 30 minutes, Isabella dismantled a conspiracy that had taken Petrov 20 years to build. His network was burning from the inside, his buyers were fleeing in panic, and his operational capabilities were being systematically destroyed. But Palmer was still in the field with orders to eliminate witnesses, and somewhere near Washington, captured Blackout Division personnel were facing execution as Petrov tried to eliminate evidence of his crimes. Isabella looked at Marcus and Patricia, feeling the weight of command that she had carried during their operational years. We're going to Washington, she said with the calm authority that had defined her military career. Petrov wants to end this with executions, but he's about to discover that some ghosts are too angry to die quietly. As Isabella prepared for the final phase of their war against Petrov's conspiracy, she felt the satisfaction of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. The quiet mechanic from Pine Valley was gone forever, and what remained was static at the height of her capabilities. The hunt was about to end, but not the way Petrov had planned.
The drive to Washington took 18 hours through back roads and forgotten highways.
Isabella's modified truck eating up miles while her mobile command center continued monitoring Petrov's increasingly desperate communications. His network was collapsing under her cyber assault. Buyers were severing connections, and federal investigators were following money trails that led directly to his door. But trapped in his black site facility, 4 captured Blackout Division personnel were facing execution as Petrov tried to eliminate evidence of his conspiracy. Isabella, Marcus, and Patricia reached the outskirts of Washington as dawn broke over the Potomac, the truck's systems having monitored federal response frequencies throughout the night. News organizations were already broadcasting stories about massive cyber attacks on defense contractors, mysterious bank account seizures, and leaked communications that suggested treason at the highest levels of government. Petrov's facility is 12 miles northeast of the city, Isabella announced, while analyzing real-time intelligence from her surveillance systems. Official designation is Research Installation Delta 7, but budget allocations suggest interrogation capabilities and security designed to prevent escape rather than intrusion. The facility appeared on satellite imagery as a modest complex of concrete buildings surrounded by electrified fencing and guard towers. But Isabella's electronic analysis revealed defensive systems that were far more sophisticated than they appeared. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, electronic countermeasures, and communication jamming equipment that suggested the installation was designed to be completely isolated from outside contact. "How many hostiles?" Marcus asked while checking his equipment for the 3rd time in an hour. Isabella's drones had been conducting reconnaissance since they arrived in the area, mapping guard rotations and analyzing defensive capabilities. 12 exterior guards, unknown number inside the main building. They're on high alert after Petrov's communication about termination protocols. Patricia studied the schematics Isabella had obtained through her infiltration of Petrov's network. The interrogation cells are in the basement level, probably reinforced against electronic surveillance. If they're following standard isolation procedures, our teammates won't even know rescue is coming. Isabella felt the familiar weight of Mission Command as she finalized their assault plan. This wasn't just about rescuing captured personnel, it was about ending Petrov's conspiracy permanently and ensuring that no one else would suffer the systematic betrayal that had cost so many lives. "Here's how we do this," she said, with the calm authority that had defined her military career. "I'll conduct electronic warfare against their defensive systems while providing overwatch and tactical intelligence. Marcus, you'll infiltrate the main building and locate our people. Patricia, you'll coordinate evacuation routes and prepare medical support." Isabella activated her most sophisticated electronic warfare systems, programs she had developed specifically for assaulting hardened government facilities. The installation's defensive network was impressive, but it had been designed to protect against conventional threats rather than someone who understood the underlying architecture of federal security systems. Her assault began with the facility's communication infrastructure. Radio systems that connected guard posts began experiencing interference that would prevent coordination during the coming chaos. Electronic locks that secured internal doors started responding to false authorization codes. Surveillance cameras began displaying recorded footage instead of real-time feeds. Initiating Phase 1, Isabella transmitted to Marcus on their secure channel. "Defensive systems are compromised. You have a 12-minute window before they realize they're under systematic attack." Marcus moved like a shadow toward the facility's perimeter, using electronic warfare support that made him invisible to thermal sensors and motion detectors. Isabella watched his progress through her surveillance systems while simultaneously escalating her assault on the installation's electronic infrastructure. The guards never knew what hit them. One moment they were maintaining routine watch rotations, the next their equipment was failing in cascade patterns that left them deaf, blind, and isolated. Radio communications filled with static, security cameras showed empty corridors that were actually occupied by an infiltrator, and electronic locks began opening without authorization. "Ghost, I'm inside the main building," Marcus's transmission came through our secure channel. Following the schematics Patricia provided, no resistance so far, they're too busy trying to figure out why their equipment stopped working. Isabella smiled grimly as she monitored Marcus's progress while maintaining her electronic assault. Petrov's facility was state-of-the-art, but state-of-the-art was useless against someone who could turn the technology against itself. Her surveillance detected Marcus reaching the basement level where our teammates were being held.
4 cells, each containing a former Blackout Division specialist who had been systematically tortured for intelligence over periods ranging from 6 months to 2 years. David Chen, Sarah Martinez, James Thompson, and Lisa Rodriguez. Names Isabella thought belonged to the dead, but who had actually been suffering prolonged interrogation designed to extract maximum intelligence value.
Static. I found them, Marcus transmitted, his voice carrying emotions that professional training couldn't suppress. They're alive, but in bad shape. Evidence of systematic torture. Probably drug-enhanced interrogation. We need immediate medical evacuation. Isabella escalated her electronic warfare to maximum intensity, creating chaos throughout the facility that would prevent organized response to their rescue operation. Every piece of electronic equipment began failing simultaneously, emergency systems activated without cause, and communication networks transmitted false information that sent guards chasing phantoms. But her surveillance also detected something that made her blood run cold. Petrov himself was in the facility, and he was moving toward the interrogation cells with what appeared to be a briefcase-sized device that her electronic analysis identified as an incendiary weapon designed to destroy evidence of the interrogation program. "Marcus, Petrov is in the building," she transmitted urgently. "He's carrying what looks like a thermite device, probably meant to eliminate the prisoners and destroy all evidence of the interrogation program. You have maybe 3 minutes before he reaches the basement level." Isabella made a decision that violated every protocol of tactical overwatch. Instead of maintaining her position and providing electronic support, she abandoned her command post and began moving toward the facility herself. Marcus would need backup, and Patricia would have to coordinate evacuation alone. "Patricia, taking direct action," she transmitted while grabbing her weapons and explosive devices. "Maintain communication with Ghost and prepare for immediate extraction of 4 additional personnel." Isabella's infiltration of the facility was like watching electronic warfare and physical combat merge into something approaching art. Her systems continued their automated assault on the installation's defensive network while she moved through corridors that her surveillance showed were clear of guards. She reached the basement level as Marcus was breaking open the final cell, their captured teammates showing the hollow-eyed exhaustion of people who had endured systematic torture but maintained their sanity through professional discipline and mutual support. "Static?" David Chen's voice carried disbelief as he recognized her despite physical changes from 2 years of interrogation. "We thought you were dead. Petrov told us he had eliminated all surviving Blackout Division personnel." Isabella helped Marcus carry their weakened teammates toward the evacuation route, while her electronic systems continued creating chaos throughout the facility. But her surveillance detected Petrov approaching their position, and the thermite device he carried would eliminate not just the prisoners, but anyone attempting to rescue them. "Ghost, we have company coming," she transmitted while positioning herself to intercept Petrov. "I'll handle Petrov personally." 20 years of careful hiding had led to this moment, Static facing the man who had betrayed everything Blackout Division had fought for, who had sold their secrets and murdered their teammates for profit. As Isabella prepared for the confrontation that would either end Petrov's conspiracy or destroy them all, she felt the cold satisfaction of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. The war for Blackout Division's legacy was about to reach its conclusion, and Isabella intended to ensure that justice was finally served.
Colonel Viktor Petrov stepped into the basement corridor like a man who had never doubted his authority, carrying the thermite device with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to eliminating problems permanently. He was taller than Isabella remembered from their operational briefings 20 years ago, his gray hair and lined face reflecting decades of bureaucratic power, but his pale blue eyes held the same cold calculation that had made him effective and ultimately deadly. "Captain Isabella Rodriguez," he said, using her real name like a weapon. "Call sign Static. I wondered when you would finally surface from whatever hole you'd been hiding in." Isabella stood between Petrov and the evacuation route where Marcus was helping their rescued teammates escape. Her weapon was trained on the man who had orchestrated the systematic murder of her unit, but Petrov showed no fear, only the irritation of someone whose carefully laid plans had been disrupted. 20 years of planning," she replied. her voice carrying the controlled fury that had been building since she first learned of his betrayal. 20 years of hunting us down, selling our capabilities, murdering our teammates. All for what? Money? Petrov smiled with the patronizing expression of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. You always were naive, Static. Money was just the tool. This was about power, about ensuring that classified capabilities developed at taxpayer expense could be leveraged for maximum strategic advantage. Isabella kept her weapon trained on him while her electronic systems continued their automated assault on the facility's defensive network. Even during this confrontation, part of her mind was calculating tactical variables, monitoring escape routes, and ensuring that her teammates could reach safety. Strategic advantage, she repeated. Is that what you call torturing American service members and selling their secrets to foreign intelligence services? I call it practical resource management, Petrov replied, activating the thermite device's timer. Blackout Division personnel possessed capabilities that were too valuable to waste on your naive concepts of loyalty and honor. My buyers understood their true worth. Isabella realized with cold clarity that Petrov genuinely believed his own justifications. In his mind, he had been conducting legitimate business, treating human beings as assets to be harvested and exploited. The revelation made her understand why their former handler had been capable of such systematic betrayal. David, Sarah, James, Lisa, she said, naming their captured teammates. They trusted you. We all did. You were supposed to protect us. Petrov's expression hardened. I protected American interests by monetizing classified capabilities that would otherwise have been wasted on sentimental nonsense about unit loyalty. Your teammates provided valuable intelligence that advanced strategic objectives. The timer on the thermite device showed 90 seconds remaining, but Petrov's confident demeanor had cracked completely. He understood that his carefully constructed conspiracy was being destroyed not by violence, but by the simple expedient of allowing him to reveal his own crimes. The device, he said, gesturing toward the thermite weapon, if it detonates, you die along with all evidence of the interrogation program. Isabella smiled with the cold satisfaction that had made Static legendary among electronic warfare specialists. Victor, you always underestimated your opponents. The evidence isn't in this facility. She activated another program, and Petrov's smartphone began displaying files that documented his entire conspiracy. Financial records, communication intercepts, operation plans, photographs of tortured prisoners. Everything Isabella had collected during her cyber assault on his network was being transmitted to federal investigators in real time. 20 years of your crimes, she said, while monitoring the evacuation through her electronic surveillance. Every transaction, every murder, every betrayal. All documented, all being transmitted to authorities who can't be bought or intimidated.
Petrov looked at his device's timer. 30 seconds. Then back at Isabella. Even if you escape, my network will continue. I have associates, backup plans, resources you can't imagine. Had, Isabella corrected. Past tense. Your network is gone. Your accounts are frozen, and your associates are being arrested by federal agents who received comprehensive evidence packages 6 hours ago. The timer showed 15 seconds. Petrov's eyes carried the desperate calculation of someone realizing that all his carefully laid plans had not only failed, but had been turned against him with surgical precision. You can't stop the termination protocols, he said, making one final attempt to maintain control. Palmer has orders to eliminate all surviving Blackout Division personnel. Isabella's smile widened as her surveillance detected Marcus and Patricia successfully evacuating their rescued teammates from the facility. Palmer's been arrested by FBI counterintelligence agents who received his location from my electronic surveillance. His termination protocols ended when federal marshals surrounded his position. The thermite device timer reached 0, but instead of detonating, it simply displayed a message: device disabled by remote access. Isabella had penetrated even Petrov's failsafe weapon, turning his final trump card into useless electronic components. Petrov stared at the disabled device, then at Isabella, understanding finally penetrating his arrogance. "You planned this entire confrontation." "I planned everything," Isabella replied, as her surveillance detected federal agents entering the facility. "From the moment Palmer walked into my garage, you were being systematically dismantled. Every move you made, every decision you took, played into a strategy designed to expose your entire conspiracy." The sound of boots on concrete announced the arrival of FBI tactical teams, guided to their location by Isabella's electronic surveillance and the GPS coordinates she had been transmitting throughout their conversation. "Colonel Viktor Petrov," a federal agent announced as tactical teams secured the corridor. "You are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, murder of federal personnel, and sale of classified intelligence to foreign entities." As Petrov was taken into custody, Isabella felt the satisfaction of a mission completed with perfect precision. The man who had betrayed Blackout Division was facing justice, his conspiracy was destroyed, and their surviving teammates were finally free from 20 years of systematic persecution. But more importantly, the quiet mechanic from Pine Valley had proven that some legends were too dangerous to hunt, and some ghosts too angry to remain buried. The war for Blackout Division's legacy was finally over, and Isabella had won it on her own terms. 3 months after Petrov's arrest, Pine Valley looked exactly the same as it always had. Morning mist still clung to evergreen-covered slopes, the pace of life still moved with the rhythm of changing seasons, and Rodriguez Auto Repair still occupied the converted barn-style building where locals brought their vehicles for honest work at fair prices. But for Isabella Rodriguez, everything had changed in ways that nobody else could see. She stood in her garage on a quiet Thursday morning, hands deep in the engine compartment of Pastor Mackenzie's ancient Ford pickup, the same truck she'd been working on when Agent Palmer first walked through her door. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was completing the same repair that had been interrupted by the beginning of the most dangerous mission of her life. The bell above her shop door chimed, and Isabella looked up to see Sheriff Linda Chen standing in the entrance, holding 2 cups of coffee from Agnes's diner and wearing the expression of someone who had questions that wouldn't be easily answered. "Thought you might need this," Linda said, offering one of the cups. "Been a while since we had a chance to talk." Isabella accepted the coffee gratefully, studying her friend's face for signs of how much the local law enforcement community knew about recent events. The federal investigation of Petrov's conspiracy had made national news, but Isabella's role had been carefully obscured by classification requirements and the need to protect ongoing intelligence operations. "Things have been busy," Isabella replied, maintaining the careful balance between truth and operational security that had defined her life for 20 years. Linda settled into one of the folding chairs near the window, her body language suggesting this was more than a social visit. "Busy is one word for it. FBI agents have been asking questions around town, wanting to know about any unusual activity at your garage over the past few months." Isabella continued working on the engine while processing this information. The federal investigation would require extensive debriefing sessions, witness statements, and documentation of evidence that could be used in Petrov's prosecution, but it also meant increased scrutiny that could compromise the carefully constructed anonymity she had maintained in Pine Valley. "What did you tell them?" she asked. Linda's smile carried the knowing expression of someone who had been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when official stories didn't match observed reality. "I told them you're the best mechanic in 3 counties, you keep to yourself, and you've never caused any trouble in this town." She paused meaningfully. "But I also told them that if they had specific questions about your background, they should ask you directly instead of fishing for information from neighbors."
Isabella felt a surge of gratitude for the friendship that had developed over 20 years of quiet coexistence. Linda had always respected her privacy while providing the kind of community connection that made small-town life meaningful. "The truth is complicated," Isabella said finally. "Some of it I can't discuss because of classification requirements, but I can tell you that recent events involved settling accounts with people who had betrayed former colleagues." Linda nodded, accepting the explanation without pressing for details. "The important thing is that you're safe, and those people can't hurt anyone else." As they drank their coffee in comfortable silence, Isabella reflected on the changes that 3 months had brought to her life. Petrov was awaiting trial in federal custody, facing charges that would ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison. Palmer and his team had been arrested and were cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. The foreign intelligence services and domestic corporations that had purchased stolen blackout division capabilities were facing their own legal consequences. Most importantly, her surviving teammates were finally free. David, Sarah, James, and Lisa were recovering from their ordeal in secure medical facilities, receiving treatment for physical injuries and psychological trauma while preparing to testify in the trials that would follow. Marcus and Patricia had been officially recognized for their role in exposing the conspiracy, receiving commendations and financial compensation for years of unofficial service. But Isabella had chosen a different path. She had declined official recognition, refused financial compensation, and requested only that her role in the investigation remain classified. The quiet mechanic from Pine Valley would continue to exist, maintaining the anonymity that had protected her for 2 decades. The bell above her shop door chimed again, and Isabella looked up to see a young woman in military fatigues standing hesitantly in the entrance. She was clean-cut, nervous, with the particular blend of confidence and uncertainty that marked recent veterans transitioning to civilian life. "Are you Isabella Rodriguez?" the woman asked. Isabella wiped her hands on a shop rag, studying the visitor with the professional assessment that had become instinctive. No visible weapons, defensive posture suggesting someone seeking help rather than posing a threat. Body language indicating military training, but not current active duty. "Depends who's asking," Isabella replied. "Sergeant Maria Santos, Army Intelligence, recently discharged." She glanced around the garage, noting the precision with which tools were arranged and the way that every piece of equipment showed signs of meticulous maintenance. "I was told you might be able to help me with a problem I'm having."
Isabella felt the familiar weight of recognition. Another veteran in trouble. Another person caught in systems that chewed up good people and spit out secrets. Word was spreading through unofficial channels that the mechanic in Pine Valley provided more than automotive repair services. "What kind of problem?" Isabella asked. Maria hesitated, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "There's a program. Officially, it doesn't exist, but they're recruiting veterans for operations that fall outside normal military channels. They say I have skills they need, but something feels wrong about the whole thing." Isabella set down her tools and walked to the coffee maker, pouring 2 cups while processing the implications of what she was hearing. The destruction of Petrov's conspiracy had eliminated one threat, but it hadn't changed the underlying systems that created such threats in the first place. "Tell me about this program," she said, offering Maria a cup and gesturing toward the folding chairs. As Maria began describing recruitment attempts that sounded disturbingly familiar, Isabella felt the pool of old responsibilities and new purposes. She had returned to Pine Valley seeking the quiet life of a small-town mechanic, but that life now included protecting other veterans from the kinds of systems that had once hunted her. Outside her garage, the mountains stretched endlessly under a sky that seemed too big for the small dramas playing out beneath its ancient gaze. But inside, Isabella Rodriguez was once again becoming static. Not the hunted fugitive she had been for 20 years, but a guardian who used legendary capabilities to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The bell above her shop door would continue to chime with visitors seeking help, some needing automotive repair and others requiring assistance with problems that couldn't be solved with conventional tools.
Isabella would provide whatever help was needed, maintaining her carefully constructed identity while ensuring that no one else would suffer the systematic betrayal that had cost so many lives. In Pine Valley, where time moved differently and secrets stayed buried, the legend of Static lived on, not in classified files or military records, but in the quiet courage of someone who had chosen to use extraordinary capabilities for ordinary justice, one rescued soul at a time. As the sun climbed higher over the mountains, Isabella Rodriguez continued working on Pastor Mackenzie's truck while listening to Maria's story and planning how to help another veteran navigate the dangerous waters between service and survival. The war for Blackout Division's legacy was over, but the mission to protect good people from institutional darkness would continue for as long as Isabella drew breath. Some legends, she had learned, were too important to let die. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.